This is In the News with David Lucas. If this is your first time joining us on the channel, I'd like to ask you to like and subscribe and join the conversation. Today I'm going to be talking about the George Floyd murder protest that's going on around the country. So if you've seen the other video that I posted regarding the murder of George Floyd by a police officer in Minnesota, this would be considered the part 2 of that video and this ongoing conflict that's happening right now in Minnesota. The video that was posted a few days ago showed that a police officer killed a man right there on camera. I think by now you'd have to be living in outer space to not have seen it. I will show some clips from the video. I warn you that they're graphic. But this outbreak and protest around the country has been happening, and people are outraged because it's taken so long for these officers to be brought to justice, and they still haven't been. Today a report came out saying that the officer that actually killed Mr. Floyd has been taken into custody, has been arrested. But this is still early in happening right now. That means that nothing is certain as far as what his charges will be, and or if this will later get swept under the rug, or if justice will be had. The reason for this part 2 of this video is because there is rioting and protest all over the country right now. If you haven't seen, or if you haven't noticed, there are protests in Atlanta, Phoenix, Arizona, Colorado, just to name a few. There are protests going on all around the country, and the police are trying to contain those situations. Usually they break out in violence. There's different things that's happening like that all around the country. And we're finding that there are different opinions about this. Now, for many, this is new. This is new. They've seen over time some different types of protests. A few months ago, there were some right-wing groups in different parts of the country showing up with weapons and all this type of thing. Protests are as old as this country. So I want to point out a couple of things real quick. Protests are a given right in America. And this country was founded basically off of a protest. The United States came originally from a protest. What we know as the United States today was at one time under another rule. And it was a protest that separated the United States from England. Okay? Protests are a normal means of letting your voice be heard. There are different types of protests. There are very peaceful, calm protests, like we saw with Kaepernick on the football team where he took a knee. And people were still upset over that protest. A lot of people got upset and wanted him fired because he wouldn't, in their opinion, he wouldn't honor the national anthem. He took a knee during the national anthem. And that set some people off. That was a protest, okay? Other, armed protests occur in America. People can go down to the Capitol in a city and take military-style weapons to a protest, and nothing comes of it. It's a normal part of letting your voice be heard. There are situations, though, in America where protests can turn violent. And they can turn violent when two opposing forces have two different ideas and they believe in them with all their conviction, and these things can be set off and they can become violent. Okay, when the police and others decide to attack people or make people feel like their voices aren't being heard, these situations can escalate and become violent. Okay, and that's what's happening right now around the country. I can't tell you how to feel about that, but I can tell you this: it is a situation that everyone wants to avoid. Okay, but at the same time, it's almost necessary. It's almost necessary for these folks to get their voice heard, to get the justice that they want, that they seek. It's a necessary evil. Sometimes making a lot of noise will make people wake up and think outside of their norm to come up with better solutions. Okay, what people are protesting right now is of the gravest, most important type of protest. A man's life, an innocent man, his life was taken. As a result, people like me feel like that could happen to anyone and at any time. When the authorities decide they're just going to take your life and there's no justice to be had, because up to today, no arrests of these police officers have been made. Now, going further, all of these police officers, in my opinion, should be arrested. Only one has, and I think there's 4 involved in this particular incident, because the other 3 at some point could have stopped this man from killing an innocent man. So, why the outrage? Why the frustration? It's because it's a cycle. It continues to happen. It has to break. People are fed up. People are upset. People are angry because it keeps on happening. And until laws in this nation, this great nation, change, come up to date. What do I mean by that? We've had some laws that's been on the books for hundreds of years. Some recent years, okay? Some have been amended, some have been changed. But there are plenty of laws that are on the books in these different states that are old and outdated, and they need to be changed. And what do I mean by that? There's no reason that a police officer can kill someone and not be arrested for murder himself. If I can be arrested for murder, he can be arrested for murder. And that means that is our understanding of the law in the United States. And so we feel like no one is above the law. If anything, a police officer ought to be held to a higher standard. If this is the median standard, then the police officer, because he carries a badge, because he has a weapon, and because of his position in society, he should have even a higher standard, not a lower standard. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that these police officers have been around for a while, and now they feel like they're above the law. And that's a problem. So I'm going to tell you this. I think that excuses and injustice is not the way to go. I think these men need to be brought to justice. I think it's past the time of just excuses being made. I think it's a time in the day and in our history now where people are demanding change. And that change happens from the ground up and then up down. It just needs to happen. The system, the justice system in and of itself is corrupt. We know it's corrupt, and it needs to change. And a lot of people are upset about that. Why are they protesting about that? Okay? Just because that's not your life, it doesn't mean that it's not mine in the United States. And we have to start dealing with the fact that there's a lot of things that don't go on in the white community, but they do happen in the African American community, in the Latin American and Hispanic communities, in the Chinese and Asian communities. These things are a threat to us, and that's what makes them important. And we need the white community to step up and say, you know what, I think that everyone needs to be equal, including the authorities. We need to hold them accountable as well. When these riots and things occur, be very careful to point your finger at one particular group or another when looting and different things start happening. Because sometimes it's a setup. What do I mean by that? Well, we saw all of these fires and things burning overnight in Minnesota during the riot. But then now, a day or so later, you start seeing that it wasn't necessarily the protesters that started these fires. It wasn't necessarily the protesters that started breaking windows and doing all of these different things. Okay? But we assume that the protesters started that. I want you to consider that it might even be the people in authority doing that to make this thing even more than it was and to escalate these situations. When you escalate these situations, people start fighting. Things get broken. Fires break out. People are panicking. Things get out of control. That feeling, that emotion, now fear jumps in there with it and it gets out of control. But I want you to be careful and not always think that it's the protester that started that. Some people have it within them to go out and they know there's going to be a protest, and so they show up to get the thing. They want to put fuel on the fire. Okay? They want it to get escalated. They want it to go all the way. And so that by doing so, what happens is they cause all of this ruckus. And pretty soon things cascade and they go haywire. And that's what's happening in some of these cities. It's not always the protester that start this, but it's always the protester that gets blamed for it. So I want people to be careful before they start labeling people as, troublemakers, rioters, and this and that. There were some photos that showed up on Facebook today of a guy, apparently he's an officer in the area, and he was going out and starting fires and starting trouble, okay? But he wanted it to appear as though it was a protester doing this, okay? People have their reasons, their twisted reasons of doing these things and putting it off on other people. I want you to be careful of that, because that's one of the things that always tends to happen when these riots and different things get started. You don't know who actually started it. You don't know who actually took it to the next level, the dangerous level. Okay? But we can finger point and we can start giving that kind of instance to it. Now, I will say this. If you're protesting in Atlanta, in Phoenix, in Colorado, in Minnesota, my heart goes out to you. To be honest with you, if I were there, I would be probably right in the mix of it with you right now, because watching those videos, I felt so much anger. I felt so much rage. And I felt the injustice that's going on right there. And I don't think it's over. I don't think it's over. And I am asking people to step up and really bring these men to justice, because there's no excuse. It is unacceptable not to bring these men to justice. And I feel like you can't bring one without bringing them all. They're all in it together. They could have They could have stopped this. You know, we're not back in the day of when we could just say, hand them over. Hand them over to the community and let the community deal with them. You know, we are a land of laws. We can't demand that you hand these people over to the community and let the community deal with them. Okay? We understand that that would be barbaric. Okay? Those men would get ripped to shreds. They literally would. Okay? But we are a nation of laws, and all of those men need to be held accountable for what they did. Why? Because it sets a precedent that the police are not supposed to take innocent people's lives on the street like they did. Today we're going to end the show a little differently than we ordinarily do. I can't very well hold you for 9 minutes, but I would ask for a moment of silence for 9 seconds. Thank you. This is David Lucas within the news.